The Nuremberg Code is a set of ethical principles that govern human experimentation. It was published in 1947 by American judges who presided over the doctor's trial during the Nuremberg Military Tribunal. In this video, I will read the Nuremberg Code directly from the archives, and share the fate of the 23 Nazi doctors and administrators who stood accused of violating them. The full text can be found in the Library of Congress under the following title: Trials of War Criminals Before the Nuremberg Military Tribunals under Control Council Law No. 10, Volume 2. We'll begin now on page 181. Permissible medical experiments. The great weight of the evidence before us is to the effect that certain types of medical experiments on human beings, when kept within reasonably well-defined bounds, conform to the ethics of the medical profession generally. The protagonists of the practice of human experimentation justify their views on the basis that such experiments yield results for the good of society that are unprocurable by other methods or means of study. All agree, however, that certain basic principles must be observed in order to satisfy moral, ethical and legal concepts. Number 1. The voluntary consent of the human subject is absolutely essential. This means that the person involved should have legal capacity to give consent. Should be so situated as to be able to exercise free power of choice, without the intervention of any element of force, fraud, deceit, duress, overreaching, or other ulterior form of constraint or coercion, and should have sufficient knowledge and comprehension of the elements of the subject matter involved as to enable him to make an understanding and enlightened decision. This latter element requires that before the acceptance of an affirmative decision by the experimental subject there should be made known to him the nature, duration, and purpose of the experiment, the method and means by which it is to be conducted, all inconveniences and hazards reasonably to be expected, and the effects upon his health or person which may possibly come from his participation in the experiment. The duty and responsibility for ascertaining the quality of the consent rests upon each individual who initiates, directs or engages in the experiment. It is a personal duty and responsibility which may not be delegated to another with impunity. Number 2. The experiment should be such as to yield fruitful results for the good of society, unprocurable by other methods or means of study, and not random and unnecessary in nature. Number 3. The experiment should be so designed and based on the results of animal experimentation, and a knowledge of the natural history of the disease or other problem under study that the anticipated results will justify the performance of the experiment. Number 4. The experiment should be so conducted as to avoid all unnecessary physical and mental suffering and injury. Number 5. No experiment should be conducted where there is an a priori reason to believe that death or disabling injury will occur, except, perhaps, in those experiments where the experimental physicians also serve as subjects. Number 6. The degree of risk to be taken should never exceed that determined by the humanitarian importance of the problem to be solved by the experiment. Number 7. Proper preparations should be made and adequate facilities provided to protect the experimental subject against even remote possibilities of injury, disability, or death. Number 8. The experiment should be conducted only by scientifically qualified persons. The highest degree of skill and care should be required through all stages of the experiment of those who conduct or engage in the experiment. Number 9. During the course of the experiment the human subject should be at liberty to bring the experiment to an end if he has reached the physical or mental state where continuation of the experiment seems to him to be impossible. Number 10. During the course of the experiment the scientist in charge must be prepared to terminate the experiment at any stage. If he has probable cause to believe, in the exercise of good faith, superior skill, and careful judgment required of him, that a continuation of the experiment is likely to result in injury, disability, or death to the experimental subject. Of the 10 principles which have been enumerated, our judicial concern, of course, is with those requirements which are purely legal in nature or which at least are so clearly related to matters legal that they assist us in determining criminal culpability and punishment. To go beyond that point would lead us into a field that would be beyond our sphere of competence. We find that from the evidence that in the medical experiments which have been proved, these 10 principles were much more frequently honored in their breach than in their observance. This concludes our reading of the Nuremberg Codes. The full text can be found in the U.S. Military Tribunal Archives. To learn more about the Nuremberg Codes and the doctor's trial, visit these resources. Thanks for watching.